Our most recent poll from Deltapoll shows a 16-point lead for the 16-point lead for Labour.
Wow, Joe, I nearly fell off my chair then.
Well, I have to keep it exciting. 43% for Labour, 27% for the Conservatives. And if you'd asked me what the state of the polls was this time last month, I would have said exactly the same thing. The long-term trend is one that's extremely poor for the Conservatives and continues to be so. The Conservatives have not been ahead in a single published poll by anyone since the 6th of December 2021, and Labour have had a double-digit lead in every single published poll since the 26th of September 2022.
So, given that there's been little difference over the last month, do you think it would be better for him to hang on? I mean, he keeps talking about the general election, hinting, there's been a lot of gossip from the Westminster bubble about him possibly even announcing a general election tomorrow. So that would take about 6 weeks from then. But do you think there's anything in that, or will he just cling on as long as he can?
Well, if the last decade has taught us anything about British politics, it's that nothing can be ruled out. But I do think the suggestion of a July election, or perhaps June as well, I think that is very unlikely. But at the same time, I'm not surprised it hasn't been ruled out, because a lot of this is motivated by one of two things in the case of the Conservative Party. They're either trying to keep Labour on their toes and basically keep them on a war footing the entire time in the hope that they will tire out. The other is it's intended to enforce discipline within the Conservative Party. We have the local elections coming up on Thursday, and if, as expected, they produce a very poor set of results for the Conservatives, the last thing that Rishi Sunak wants is a leadership challenge. And so essentially this is a threat to the Conservative Party to say, if you don't back me, if you don't stick with me for the next few months, I will just go to the country. And then the situation will be far worse than it will be when we finally go to the country in November, December or January, when the situation will have improved. That's the argument he's making. The question is whether the Conservative Party believes it, and perhaps more importantly, whether the British people believe it.
Well, and that's, one of the things which I despair of, and I know that many people despair of, is even that the discussion about yet another Prime Minister within one Parliament could take place. It just seems that the system is broken. And while they're messing around doing what they're doing, we start to lose faith in our system of democracy itself. Have you found that, Joe, when you've been doing your polls?
Well, trust in British institutions, whether it's individual politicians, political parties, or the political system generally, has been declining for a long time. But it's worth pointing out that this perhaps has rather a long tail. When the Houses of Parliament caught fire in 1824, people did gather on the other side of the Thames to cheer. And so it's not an entirely new phenomenon in that respect. But I think what these continued speculation talks to is the lack of unity in the Conservative Party, and that in many ways will be the most damaging thing for the Conservatives over the next few weeks and months until the general election does take place, because at any moment the Conservatives basically can expect a defection, either to Reform on the right or Labour and the Lib Dems on the left. And it does seem that a week or so only needs to go by before another three-letter acronym group is launched in some central London location to talk about their vision for the future of the Conservative Party. None of this presents a united front to the British public. And if there's one thing we know, it's that divided parties do not get elected.
I think it's more than that, though. Don't you, Joe? I think it's more than they're
Oh yes, it's a lot more. It's a lot more than that. But that is simply the issue that they face today.
With the first past the post system, obviously, which is the one that we have at the moment, it has been in polls. I think it was a couple of weeks ago now in the Sunday Times front page that one poll suggested, which is your business, of course, that the Tories might have fewer than 100 seats left after a general election if it was to take place over the next couple of months. Would you say that could be the case?
Well, I mean, let's go back to the mid-1990s. I'm sure we all remember the run-up to 1997, those of us that are old enough to remember it. And much of the discussion then was about a Canada-style wipeout, because in 1993, the Canadian general election had seen the governing Conservatives go from holding 169 of the 295 seats to winning just 2. So there was a lot of there was a lot of discussion about a Canada-style wipeout in the run-up to 1997. And in the run-up to 97, Labour at one point won 57.5% in the vote. So enormous performance by Labour in the run-up to 97. And yet, in the end, Labour won 43%, the Conservatives won 31%. But that was still good enough to get the Conservatives 165 seats, 94 of which had not changed hands since the Second World War. So I think it's very unlikely that we will see an existential threats to the Conservatives. I expect that when the election does take place, we will see a narrowing of the polls, as we would expect by historical standards. But I think it's unlikely to be anything like the size that will be required to keep Rishi Sunak anywhere near Downing Street.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Joe. Is it going to be an autumn election?
Well, I have always said, I say always, in the last few months, I have suggested that November the 21st, you heard it here, folks, is the most likely option for the election. But of course, a lot depends on events, and events, dear boy, events could have a big impact over the next few weeks and months. I don't think we can rule out. I think we can rule out an August election, and I think we can rule out an election the week of Christmas. Anything else? Very much up for grabs.
Well, that's made me tense already. I've kind of tensed up for the next 6 months, Joe. But November the 21st, you heard it here first.